Welcome back, everyone, for our last speaker of the afternoon. Kilpatrick, going to be looking at finding and interpreting the lost and forgotten early inscribed stones of Pictland. Kelly's going to give her presentation on a pre-recorded version, but will be available for answering questions live at the end of the talk. So over to you, Kelly, to run your recording.
Today, we are drawn to the study of Scotland in the first millennium because of the many unsolved mysteries arising from this period. Although few narrative texts survive from early Scotland, these peoples have left behind a wealth of evidence for the archaeologist, art historian, and name specialist to study. The tremendous work of Dr. Anna Ritchie has greatly contributed to a better understanding of early Scotland, and it is a delight to honor Dr. Ritchie today as she continues to be an inspiration to myself and so many others in this field.
We know that early Scotland was culturally diverse, including peoples such as the Picts, Gaels, Britons, Angles, and later Scandinavians, and that this era ushered in great social and political changes, such as the conversion to Christianity and the merging of kingdoms leading to the creation of Olapa. The diversity of early Scotland is reflected in surviving monumental sculpture, such as the inscribed stones of southern Scotland, the Govan School, the Anglian sculpture at Abercorn, the crosses of the West Highlands and Islands, and the Pictish symbol stones. The Picts, the peoples who inhabited much of eastern and northern Scotland, disappeared from the historical record in about the 10th century. There are over 300 artifacts with Pictish symbols, the majority of which are carved stones. Pictish symbols remain undeciphered, although it is generally agreed that the symbols were a system for conveying information, most likely about individuals or groups of people. But the Picts also had other systems for conveying information at their disposal. Writing, or rather, writing in the sense we are familiar with, using letters to construct words and words to construct phrases. Evidence of this is found on carved stones and other engraved artifacts from Pictish regions. The Picts adopted the Ogham and Roman alphabets for inscriptions. Ogham is an alphabet in which the letters are represented by series of strokes. It developed in Ireland, where the earliest inscriptions date to the 4th century. There are about 35 surviving Ogham inscriptions from Scotland, and if you are interested, I highly recommend the works of Professor Catherine Forsyth, whose research has greatly enhanced our knowledge of the Scottish Ogham inscriptions.
In Pictland, the abundance of symbols strongly suggests that these were the primary form of communication on public monuments. The second largest category of epigraphy in Pictland is the Ogham inscriptions, but there is considerably less evidence surviving for the use of the Roman alphabet in central, eastern, and northern Scotland.
Previously, there were about 11 or 12 well-known Roman alphabet inscriptions from Pictish regions. These include the Newton stone, which also has a Pictish symbol and an Ogham inscription, the Duplin cross, which also has an Ogham inscription, Auchenblay, which also has an Ogham inscription, St. Vigin's, also known as the Drosten stone, Crieff, Lethnot, and Tarbet, both of which are in capital letters. There is also one from Dull, Papastronse, Ravenscraig, and the Mary Stone at Brechin. In addition to these, there is an engraving on a sword shape from St. Ninian's Isle in Shetland. These inscriptions reflect centuries of development of the use of the Roman alphabet in Pictland. The Picts were probably first introduced to the Roman alphabet through trade and subsequently by Christian missionaries, as Latin was the written and spoken language of the Church. On Pictish Christian sculpture, books and book satchels appear on no less than 18 monuments. Most of these Roman alphabet inscriptions, such as the Drosten stone at St. Vigen's, are engraved in a script reflecting the book hand of manuscripts produced in ecclesiastical centres in Ireland and Britain between the 7th and 9th centuries. The relief-carved Latin inscription on the Tarbet stone is in capitals and reflects the elaborate display scripts found in insular manuscripts such as the 8th century Lindisfarne Gospels. The Newton stone, however, probably dates to the 6th or early 7th century and was erected at a time when Christianity was only just taking hold. The Newton stone inscription is likely to be entirely in the vernacular or in Pictish. The letter forms in this inscription reflect a script made using a stylus, not a quill or pen. This is what you would call a dry point script, and this type of script was commonly used elsewhere in late antique and early medieval Europe for less formal writing on media such as wax, wooden, or lead tablets. While conducting research on the Newton stone, I came across this illustration of a stone called the Kilmadoc stone. I thought it would be useful to compare this with the Newton alphabetic inscription, as some of the letter forms looked similar, but I could not find the Kilmadoc stone or any records for it. While searching for the Kilmadoc stone, I learned that there was another mysterious inscribed stone from Burgh Head, which is now also missing, and a colleague brought my attention to another Roman alphabet inscribed stone in Stirling called the Green Loaning stone. These three stones did not feature in any publications on inscribed stones from Scotland printed within the last 50 years, and I struggled to find information about them in the Historic Environment Scotland Canmore database. The entries for the Kilmadoc and Green Loaning stones were catalogued under alternative and more obscure names, and the Burgh Head stone did not even have a Canmore entry. With such a small number of Roman alphabet inscriptions surviving from Pictland, how could these three stones have escaped cataloging and scholarly recognition?
These three inscribed stones were discovered in the 19th century, and while they formed the basis for multiple 19th and early 20th century discussions about language in early Scotland, they have since fallen off the radar. I set off to investigate these three stones, following a trail of antiquarian correspondence, publications, and cast, in one instance well beyond the borders of Scotland. While my primary aim was to explore the surviving documentation and material evidence related to these stones, in the course of this investigation, I uncovered a treasure trove of information about early inscriptions in Scotland, which I am excited to share with you now.
The most recent publication about the Kilmadoc stone is the 1904 book titled Celtic Researches, Studies in the History and Distribution of the Ancient Goidelic Language and Peoples by Edward Williams Byron Nicholson. Nicholson's book has a section focusing on Pictish inscriptions, including the Kilmadoc and Burgh Head inscriptions, and is one of the more recent sources referring to the Green Loaning stone. Edward Nicholson became the key witness in my investigation. Edward Williams Byron Nicholson was born on the 16th of March in 1849 in St. Helier, Jersey. He was the son of Edward Nicholson, a member of the Royal Navy until 1847, and the actress Emily Hamilton Wall. His father died in California participating in the gold rush when Nicholson was only a year old, and he and his mother later moved to Llanrwst in Wales to be with her family. By 1869, Nicholson had earned a first class in classics at Trinity College, Oxford, with further qualifications in law and history by 1871. He then became a librarian at the School of Tonbridge and the Oxford Union, and the librarian of the London Institute in 1873. In 1876, he married Helen Grant, and they had 3 daughters. He turned to literary pursuits during this period, publishing The Christ Child and Other Poems in 1877 and The Rights of an Animal in 1879. In 1881, the librarian of the Bodleian Library at Oxford died, and the position fell vacant. Edward Nicholson hesitantly applied, aware that his chances were slim because all previous post holders had been scholar librarians. But he had the support of Oxford's Vice-Chancellor, who was impressed by his previous library reforms. To Nicholson's surprise, and much to the surprise of others, he was awarded the post and was Bodlei's librarian from 1882 until his death in 1912. Change is often slow to occur at Oxford, and Nicholson's reforms were frequently met with hostility that affected his health. One of his last arguments with staff was because he appointed a woman to a permanent position within the organization. Nicholson was diagnosed with heart disease in the 1890s, but despite setbacks to his health, he published extensively in this period, and it was during this time that he became especially interested in Celtic inscriptions and languages. This was the period of the Celtic Revival, and Nicholson was friends with many scholars we are familiar with today, such as Sir John Rhys, Charles Plummer, John Romilly Allen, Joseph Anderson, and James Carnegie, the Earl of South Esk, to name but a few. Edward Nicholson shared and received ideas and feedback about inscriptions with his colleagues and acquired as much information as he could about inscriptions by commissioning photographs and impressions. Nicholson was also quite keen on field research, and he made numerous visits to inscribed stones to record the inscriptions by making his own rubbings. This was one of the major discoveries of my investigation. Nicholson's rubbings of Scottish and Welsh Ogham and Roman alphabet inscriptions still survive, preserved in 2 bound manuscripts in the Bodleian Library Special Collections at Oxford. Within this collection, his letters relating to these inscriptions are bound in multiple volumes, and these even include his receipts for photographic commissions of monuments used in his research and publications. We even have Nicholson's hotel bills, thus making it possible to trace his journeys. This immensely important collection has, to my knowledge, not been explored by modern scholars. Nicholson's letters are a wonderful source of information for how inscriptions were studied by scholars in the late 19th century. For example, we know from one letter dated to the 5th of December 1893 that John Romilly Allen had loaned Nicholson all his rubbings of the Scotch Oghams. These letters also preserve human touches, which many of us will be able to relate to today. For example, in this letter, Allen laments, "The Scotch Oghams are, I fear, likely to land some of us in a lunatic asylum," concluding that Professor John Rhys only had a miraculous escape from such a fate. Nicholson returned Allen's rubbings a year later, confirmed in a letter dated 24th of May, 1894, where Allen again takes delight in noting, "The discovery of the Silchester Ogham has upset Professor Rhys and everyone else." In 1896, Nicholson published The Vernacular Inscriptions of the Ancient Kingdom of Ullapen, which is a series of essays examining Pictish inscriptions. The focus of the work is primarily Ogham inscriptions, but Nicholson was not just interested in Pictish Oghams. He was also interested in Roman letter inscriptions. In July 1895, 2 stones discovered near Doon in Kilmadock parish in Perthshire were photographed and sent to the Society of Antiquaries in Edinburgh. One is commonly called the Killyhat Burn stone, and the other the Annet Burn or Kilmadock stone. The Killyhat stone was discovered between 1886 and 1888, and it was thought to be an Ogham inscribed stone. In 1896, Nicholson wrote to Adam Winter, the gamekeeper of Doon Lodge, where these stones were then housed, who responded on 12th of January 1896, stating that he had enclosed the cost of photographs for these stones, as well as descriptions of them. Nicholson published on the Killyhat stone in 1896, though the authenticity of the inscription was dismissed by Joseph Anderson, who said that the scratchings on this stone do not appear to be distinctly intentional. Edward Nicholson not only made his own rubbings of inscriptions, but also received drawings and impressions from correspondents, such as the one by Adam Winter shown here. In this case, he acquired the stone itself.
Between 1896 and the publication of Celtic Researches in 1904, Nicholson physically obtained the Kilmadock stone. I have yet to uncover documentation to confirm if Nicholson was given the stone by the keeper of Doon Lodge or if he purchased it, but in any case it had come into his possession and was taken to Oxford, where it remains to this day. Nicholson states in his work Celtic Researches that the Kilmadock and Killyhat burnstones are now in my possession and that they can be seen in the Bodleian Library with other cast of stones made for him, along with his volume of rubbings and photographs.
At this point in the investigation, I left Scotland for Oxford. A member of the Bodleian Special Collections team brought Nicholson's manuscripts to my attention and informed me that the Bodleian's collections of inscriptions was moved to the Ashmolean Museum in 1947. I contacted the Ashmolean Museum, and sure enough, in their collection was the Kilmadock stone. Unfortunately, I could find no record of the Killyhat stone in Oxford. The Kilmadock stone now resides in the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, and the curators have been immensely helpful by providing me with documentation related to this stone and allowing me to examine it. Although other Bodleian inscriptions were moved in 1947, the Kilmadock stone did not make its way to the Ashmolean until 1966, when the museum bought it for £20 from Edward Nicholson's daughter. There was some correspondence between Nicholson's daughter and the keeper of the Ashmolean. In March 1961, it was suggested that she consider sending it to the National Museum of Antiquaries in Edinburgh. But she responded on the 10th of May, "Let the Ashmolean have it. I would infinitely rather it stayed in Oxford. It lived for so many years on my father's table in Bodley." From Scotland to Oxford, for many years the Kilmadock stone's home was Nicholson's desk in the Duke Humphreys Library in the Bodleian. A letter from Adam Winter to Edward Nicholson is probably the most detailed description of the Kilmadock stone discovery. He states that it was found about 2 years ago, that would be in 1894, in the Annet Burn, about 200 yards above where the burn enters the River Teith. In a separate article, Joseph Anderson specifies that the stone was discovered by one of Mr. Winter's assistants in Annet Burn near the site of St. Ives Church, the old chapel of Kilmadock. The landscape of St. Ives Church near a river confluence is characteristic of the location of early medieval ecclesiastical sites. The name of the burn, Annet, is further indication that this may be an early ecclesiastical site, as Gaelic Aneth denotes a patron saint's church or a church housing the relics of its patron. In addition to this, a slab with an interlaced cross and fragments of a Pictish-style animal have also been recovered from this site. The Kilmadock stone is grey whinstone. The face with the inscription has been smoothed for carving. Chisel marks can be found on the sides, and there are no carvings on the back, which does not have a smoothed surface. The stone is fragmented, tapering considerably towards the top. The left side is about 24 centimeters long and about 8 centimeters wide at one end and 5 centimeters at the top. The right side is about 21 centimeters long. The top of the stone is about 10 centimeters across and the bottom is about 18 centimeters. At the bottom is a sloped edge, beneath which is a small square extension that is about 6 centimeters high by 10 centimeters wide. This squarish extension may suggest that the stone once sat upright in a socket. This inscription is very worn. We know that it was found in a burn, and water wear is likely to have had a significant impact on the weathering process. Nevertheless, letters are visible on this stone. Furthermore, they are all roughly the same height. Each letter is about 2 centimeters high, and this uniformity of size strongly suggests that they are genuine letters. Nicholson was convinced that the Kilmadock stone was a Pictish inscription, but Joseph Anderson did not share Nicholson's enthusiasm, stating, "I have no hesitation in saying that I cannot agree with Mr. Nicholson that they form a Pictish inscription, although I am unable to even conjecture what they may really be." From a paleographical perspective, I believe the Kilmadock stone is authentic and early. There are at least 4 lines of letters. 2 letters are visible on the top. These letters and their placement is similar to the top line of the green loaning stone, which we will examine momentarily. The second line contains at least 5 letters. This possibly reads U or V, which were interchangeable in this period, followed by an angular or square-shaped C, which you often get in epigraphic inscriptions, another U-shaped letter that is similar in style to some found on the Newton stone, followed by what might be an O. The final letter is fragmented, but the curvature suggests it might be an S or a sickle-shaped G. The middle of the stone is heavily weathered, though the remains of 2 potential letters can be seen. The next line of letters contains what might be an O, followed by additional letters which I have not deciphered yet, and this ends in a T. The first letter of the last line really caught my attention. It is difficult to see, but by feel, you can make out a diagonal crossbar between the 2 vertical lines. This is an N, an H-shaped N to be specific, the type of which is more prevalent in documents and inscriptions from the late antique and early medieval period. The next letter Nicholson interpreted as being on its own line, but by feel, you can tell that these 2 individual letters are in fact connected to the letters in the line below. This is called a conjoined letter. While most conjoined letters in insular inscriptions extend to the side or downwards, I am confident that this is what was intended here because a sensible reading emerges. The next letter is an M, followed by another conjoined letter to a T. This and the previous conjoined letters are likely to be an I with the serif top, but we may also want to compare them with the Y-shaped letters on the Newton stone, which may be interpreted as an E. The final carving on this line is an X or a cross. Though this is a provisional reading, the final line appears to contain the term Nimit or Nevet. Nimit is attested as a personal name in Old Breton, and the name is ultimately derived from the Celtic term Neveton, meaning a sacred site or a place with a shrine. Place names containing this term are frequently attested in Romano-British place names, and they are also found in Pictish regions of Scotland, though whether or not they are derived from a Brittonic Pictish or Gallic origin is at present still up for debate. Although reading this stone is a work in progress, it does not appear to be in Latin, and the final line records a Celtic, probably a Brittonic, word or name. Green Loaning is only about 12 miles from St. Ives Church in Kilmadock. Unlike the Kilmadock stone, the Green Loaning stone has never left Scotland because it weighs nearly a ton, but it has not attracted the attention it deserves. Until 2018, the stone was lying with the inscription face down in the grounds of the Smith Institute in Stirling, where it has been since about 1898. In 19th century publications, this stone was referred to as the Roundel stone. In Allen and Anderson's Early Christian Monuments of Scotland, it is called Green Loaning. The stone was found in association with the cairn at Townhead in Green Loaning near Ardagh Roman Fort in Perthshire. The stone was first described in an article in the Stirling Journal of 1823, which records that it was discovered by servants about 18 inches below the surface during ploughing in the spring of 1822. The article states, after trenching round it and removing the superincumbents, it was raised, though not without considerable difficulty, when to their astonishment they, this being the servants, discovered burnt ashes underneath. This excited in their minds suspicions of no ordinary kind, which induced them to clear the inverted side of the stone, when they were not less gratified that actually contained letters.
A letter of correspondence between John Rees and A.F. Hutcheson, dated 2nd of February 1897, relates a story about the Green Loaning Stone and a man named John Sharp who lived in the farm of Townhead. For those of you with a sensitive disposition, brace yourselves.
The top 2 lines of this inscription have been recut. The letter from Hutcheson records that Mr. Sharp says that when he was a loon herding on the field, he took a chisel and mallet and recut the lettering on the stone. I reckon this to have been about 50 years ago. Mr. Sharp affirms that he altered nothing, but was careful simply to deepen the lines of the letters as he found them. His honesty is beyond doubt. This recutting was confined to the upper or main line of the inscription and included the letters B, V, A, H. Edward Nicholson was also interested in this stone and published on this in 1896. A rubbing of the stone is now preserved in Nicholson's manuscript collection. In 1896, Nicholson was in communication with John Scott, who resided at Green Loaning Manse, who provided him with drawings of the stone. Green Loaning is a diorite slab about 1.3 meters high by 1 meter wide and 23 centimeters thick. 2 vertical lines are carved in the top center, which bears some resemblance to the Kilmadock stone. The second line has been recarved, but the third line in the middle of the stone is original. These letters have been expertly incised. The inscription is in capitals, and the first striking aspect are the A's, which do not have a crossbar. This type of A is sometimes found in Roman epigraphy, including examples from the Antonine Wall and in early inscriptions from Wales. Professor Robert McAllister's analysis suggested the 2 lines between the V and R and the M and the B are the letter E. Traditionally, this was how E was written in Old Roman cursive, and it is not commonly found in inscriptions but in less formal writing. But I need to view this stone first to confirm McAllister's transliteration. As you can see here, John Scott's drawing, sent to Nicholson, seems to show that these 2 lines are connected at the bottom and are a U. McAllister dates the Green Loaning Stone to the 5th or 6th century. Even though the top line has been tampered with, this stone and the inscriptions on it need to be taken seriously and subject to a new analysis, which I hope to do with colleagues in the near future. Although I have emphasized Pictland throughout this paper, none of the inscriptions under investigation preserve Pictish symbols, which would confirm Pictishness. The tentative suggestion that they are Pictish is based on their fine spots, but it should be noted that both the Kilmadock and Green Loaning stones come from Stirlingshire, a border zone between the Gaels, Britons, Gwathothan, and the Picts. This area was likely home to the Maiatai, who were mentioned in the life of St. Columba. The letters on the Kilmadock stone bear some resemblance to those on the Newton stone in Aberdeenshire, and one thing that both stones have in common with Pictish ogham and vernacular inscriptions is the difficulty of interpretation. The Kilmadock and Green Loaning stones, however, are more likely to indicate the presence of a local style that has hitherto gone unnoticed. One inscription that certainly comes from a Pictish site is the one shown here from Burgh Head. This inscribed stone was found by Hugh W. Young, the third laird of Burgh Head, in about 1890. Burgh Head was once the site of the largest known Pictish fort. It is a promontory fort covering an area of about 5.5 hectares. Nearly 30 incised Pictish carvings of bulls have been recovered from the site. There have also been multiple relief-carved cross slab and shrine fragments recovered from this site, which suggest the presence of an early chapel. Another well-known antiquity from Burgh Head is the well with the rock-cut steps. The fort at Burgh Head has been a long-standing attraction to archaeologists. The first excavations at the site were led by James MacDonald in the 1860s, and in the 1890s, Hugh Young conducted excavations of the ramparts and other parts of the promontory. Young's letters to Nicholson provide considerable clarity regarding the find spot of this inscribed stone. In a letter dated 15th of September 1896, Young notes that this stone was not found near the location of the ancient church, but was got near the very point of the promontory which overhangs the sea. Continuing, near where it was got, a stone coffin was found some 30 years ago. In a second letter from Young, dated 25th of September 1896, he remarks, "The stone coffin found near where this stone was got was buried in a mound on the rampart, showing that the burial took place in the ruins." In August 1897, Nicholson briefly visited Burgh Head and met Hugh Young. Unfortunately, the inscribed stone from Burgh Head found by Young is now lost. Despite the efforts of the Elgin Museum, the Falconer, and others from Burgh Head Headland Trust, we have been unable to locate the original. We know from a letter written by Young on the 21st of October 1896 that the stone was then kept in the harbour office at Burgh Head, and that in 1897 he had 3 casts of the stone made. Fortunately, some of these replicas survive. A plaster cast of this inscribed stone is now kept in the National Museums of Scotland, and a paper impression of this inscription is now preserved with Edward Nicholson's rubbings in the Bodleian Library. Joseph Anderson viewed the Burgh Head stone in 1890 and was quick to dismiss it as neither ancient nor important, and indeed, at first glance, there is nothing in the letter forms that looks particularly medieval. The letters seem to occur in pairs, with the second of each being C or possibly G, which immediately makes one wonder if this is perhaps graffiti or initials left by an 18th or 19th century party of tourists. The context of its discovery, however, suggests that we should probably not rule it out just yet. Due to the pandemic, I have been unable to visit the National Museums in Edinburgh, and until I do so, wish to refrain from making any official commentary about the letter forms of this stone. To conclude, I hope this paper has highlighted the potential significance of these 3 overlooked inscribed stones and demonstrated the importance of antiquarian accounts and artifacts, which in this case have helped to solve many mysteries surrounding these stones. While this research was hampered by the pandemic, I look forward to completing this investigation in future, which will also include further analysis of Edward Nicholson's collection.
In the first decade of the 20th century, Nicholson's heart disease continued to worsen, and he collapsed twice on the street in 1907. Despite ill health, after the publication of Celtic Researches in 1904, Nicholson turned most of his attention to Saxon history and the Welsh genealogies. He did not take an official leave of absence until late February 1912, and he died at home on the 17th of March in the same year. While today we might look on 19th and early 20th century scholarship with some disdain because the field of linguistics has moved on considerably, we have every reason to be grateful for the foundation that these earlier scholars laid. As a librarian, Nicholson realized the importance of cataloging, and one of the unexpected finds in this investigation was his volumes of rubbings and correspondence. Thanks to the records of Edward Williams Byron Nicholson and the cast store in Edinburgh, these inscribed stones, no longer forgotten or ignored, will be reanalyzed by specialists, adding to our knowledge about writing and language in early Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kelly. That was superb. Great to see some of these things being looked at in detail for the first time in a long time. Absolutely, a fabulous bit of detective work on your part to get these archives. Very nice stuff. So let's see, we've got some questions coming in here if you're good to go. Oh, actually, not a question, but just a comment from Peter Herbert. Peter is a member of Rook, the Rescuers of Old Kilmadoc. And Peter is saying that the Kilmadoc stone has been found. It is actually in the Ashmolean Museum stores in Oxford. He made inquiries about it at the Bodleian and they informed him of its current whereabouts. He's got an accession number for it and he's saying we need to get some photographs, get it photogrammetry, and he's very keen to see it coming back to Scotland because he reckons it was only given on loan. So there you go, if you feel like undertaking a rescue mission.
Oh, good luck. They like it. They're quite fond of that little stuff. Yeah, so no, thank you, Peter. It's very nice to make your acquaintance. I only found out about midway through this investigation that someone, they wouldn't tell me any names, had made an inquiry about the Kilmadoc stone a few years ago. So it's very nice to meet you. Yes, I think good luck getting it off of them. They like that little stone. And also they had it miscatalogued as an Ogham stone, which is how Nicholson's daughter described it in the sale of the stone to the Ashmolean. So I think one of the first things we need to do is to get them to update their records about the stone. And what I'm trying to do at the moment as well is to see if it's possible to get someone to identify the particular type of sandstone that it's made from, which might even help us to identify, local quarries and things like that.
Well, there you go. And of course, as well as the cross lab with the interlaced cross, the good people at Rook have uncovered a couple more small fragments which look like they come from a different stone at Old Kilmadoc, again with Pictish style animals with muscle scrolls, etc., etc. So,
right. Oh yes, exciting.
Yeah. So definitely. And Peter is also pointing out. You'll be able to read his comments himself. He's also pointing out the proliferation of church-related names in the vicinity. With there are 4 within that immediate environ of the old church. Well,
I've seen his offer of £21.
£21, so they can make a small profit. Yeah, that would be good. I managed to track down a fragment of a Pictish cross slab from just south of Stonehaven. It had been found in the 1960s when a local farmer was demolishing a hen house, and it was being used as a padstone for one of the upright timbers of his hen house. So he took it into the museum at Aberdeen University, who confirmed it was a Pictish cross slab, and he offered it to them and they went, nah, it's okay. So he took it home and had it as an ornament at the house. And then when he and his family moved down to England, they took it with them and they ended up in Devon with his divorced wife. And I managed to persuade my boss to let me fly down and at least get it recorded, which we did. And I tried my best to talk her into letting me take it back with me. And she said no, but he successfully persuaded her, and it is now with Marischal College Museum in their collection. We did get it back. So always worth keeping your fingers crossed.
Good
Peter.
try. Yeah.
These
I
things,
think,
these
yes.
things can happen. Comment from Neil Robertson. Greatly enjoyed your recent excellent PSAS paper on Newton.
Thank you.
Now it turns out not so isolated, it seems.
Perhaps not. I think perhaps not. I think some of the letter forms look similar, and I do hope to go back and spend more time at the Ashmolean, because of course, due to the pandemic, I was only allowed certain times, so I wasn't allowed more than 2 hours with it at a time. And I was really fortunate to actually be able to see it at all, because my schedule to see it was not until the 7th of March, which would have been very bad for this conference, but they did manage to get me a booking sooner.
Oh, well, that's good. Neil Robertson is also saying perhaps have another look in the Annet Burn when the stream is low. So I don't know whether that's a suggestion for you to do, Peter, or whether Neil's offering to go and do that for you. Neil does have an astonishing track record of just stepping over a wall or jumping into a burn and coming out with a piece of early medieval sculpture stuck to his boot. So, you know, get him down there, I think. I like the reference, Romilly Allen's reference about Pictish Ogham ending you up in a lunatic asylum. So if Professor Forsyth ever describes Glasgow University as a lunatic asylum, we'll know that Alan was right. Do we have any other questions coming up for Kelly? There will be a chance to pop into her chat room and discuss her paper with her, but if anybody else has any other questions, doesn't look like it. Nothing else coming in. So in that case, I think although we're a little ahead of schedule, oh, wait a minute. Oh no, actually somebody's saying thank you for all the interesting talks. Very good.